What if I told you that the Bible's book of Genesis and the myths of the ancient Sumerians, a civilization thousands of years older, might share a mysterious connection? You might think, how could two cultures, separated by time and geography, tell such similar stories? But what if I told you? The parallels are not only real, they're unsettling. Today we're going to explore the surprising overlaps between Sumerian mythology and the biblical stories of creation, the Great Flood, and human origins. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be questioning what you thought you knew about the origins of human history. Let's start with the beginning of it all, creation. The Sumerians, one of the world's earliest civilizations, believed the gods brought order from chaos. Their story? The world was created from the body of the great sea goddess, Tiamat. The gods fought, and Tiamat was torn apart, her body forming the heavens and the earth. Humans? Well, humans were an afterthought, when created from clay to serve the gods, do the hard labor, and free the divine beings from their burdens. Sound familiar? Let's look at the book of Genesis. Here, there's no battle, no divine chaos. Instead, a single, all-powerful God calmly speaks the world into existence in 6 days. And humans? Made from the dust of the earth, not to serve but to rule over it. Unlike the Sumerian gods, God in Genesis shapes humans in his own image, giving them authority over all living things. But here's the real question. Why do both stories start with humans made from the earth? And why are these humans given such different roles? One mere servants, the other rulers over creation? Before we get to that, let's move on to another parallel that's even more striking. The Great Flood. We've all heard the story of Noah's Ark, right? A righteous man is told by God to build a massive boat, save his family, and gather pairs of animals to survive a devastating flood. But here's something that might shock you. The Sumerians had the flood story first. In their myth, it's the hero Utnapishtim who was warned by the gods to build a boat to save himself, his family, and animals from a flood that will wipe out humanity. Here's where it gets really interesting. Both Noah and Utnapishtim send out birds to search for dry land after the floodwaters recede. Both boats come to rest on a mountain. The similarities are almost too close to be coincidence. But there's a key difference. In Genesis, God sends the flood to cleanse a corrupt world, but then makes a promise, a covenant with Noah and all of humanity. In the Sumerian myth, the gods send the flood out of frustration, annoyed at how noisy and troublesome humans had become. So what does that tell us? While both stories share the drama of survival, the Sumerian gods seem capricious, indifferent to human life. But in Genesis, the flood becomes a moral story, a cleansing act, followed by a promise of hope and redemption. And the similarities don't end there. Let's dive into the purpose of humanity in these stories. In Sumerian mythology, humans were made to be slaves. They existed to serve the gods, to do the work the gods didn't want to do themselves. In a way, the Sumerian gods created humanity out of laziness. Now contrast that with Genesis. Adam and Eve are given dominion over the earth. They're not slaves, they're caretakers. They're free to make choices, though their choices come with consequences. The relationship between God and humanity in Genesis is intimate. God even walks with them in the Garden of Eden. But after Adam and Eve's fall, something changes. It's here that Genesis reveals the complexity of human free will and the consequences of moral choice. Compare that to the Sumerian worldview, where humans are always at the mercy of gods who could be fickle, even cruel. Why are these differences so important? Well, they reveal something profound about how each culture viewed divine power. For the Sumerians, the gods were many, competing forces often indifferent to human suffering. In contrast, Genesis portrays a single loving God who cares deeply about humanity, even when they fall. Let's pause here for a moment. Are these parallels just coincidences? Or could they suggest that these two ancient cultures were drawing from a shared pool of mythic ideas? Scholars have debated this for centuries. Some say the Hebrew Bible borrowed elements from older Mesopotamian myths. Others argue that Genesis presents a fundamentally new worldview, where human life has meaning and purpose under the guidance of a single caring God. So, what's the truth? Were the Sumerians and Hebrews trying to answer the same questions but in different ways? Is Genesis simply a refined version of earlier myths or something entirely original? Before we wrap up, let's reflect on what this all means for us today. These ancient stories, whether from Sumerian tablets or biblical scrolls, help shape the way we see the world. They answer humanity's oldest questions,